Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the Lit Garden author series by Booktrib.com. I'm your host, Diane Parrish, author of the column Lit Garden, monthly musings and book reviews for the thoughtful reader. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Roxana Robinson about her latest novel, Leaving. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Roxana Robinson. She's an award-winning author of 11 books, including 7 novels, 3 short story collections, and a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe. Her works, featured in prestigious outlets like The New Yorker and Harper's, have earned numerous accolades, including the Maine Fiction Award and BBC's 10 Best Books recognition. A scholar of American painting, environmentalist, the former president of the Authors Guild from 2013 to 2017, she has been honored with fellowships from the NEA and the Guggenheim Foundation. Robinson has also been named a literary lion by the New York Public Library and currently teaches in the MFA program at Hunter College in New York. Welcome, Roxana.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure it is to be here.
Oh, thank you for coming. I have to tell you, this is one of my all-time favorite books. I absolutely love it. I read it when it first came out, and then I just recently listened to it, which, that's a different experience. The two, it's interesting. Have you listened to the audio? No.
It's jarring for me to listen to it in someone else's voice.
Yes, I can imagine. So I want to ask you a few questions to start about your general writing process. When you're cooking up your next novel, what comes first? Plot, characters, setting, theme? Where does the idea germinate?
It's some ideas that I find disturbing, actually. It's something that is troubling to me. And it's really just an idea that I want to explore because I don't understand it and it's troubling. So each of my books has started that way. Cost actually was going to be a very short, quiet novel about 3 generations at a family summer house. It's going to be 2 weeks, just sort of exploring the relationship between the grandparents, the mother, and the kids. And so it went off the rails very quickly and became a novel about heroin addiction. But it starts with just this question of what is it like to explore this particular issue? And I always use families as the setting because I think that that's where the most powerful emotions come from and are felt. So whatever the question is, Sparta is about war, how we deal with war in our society, what it's like to ask people, mostly men, to go out and kill people and then come back to a society where that's not acceptable. So each one it's a question that comes first. And then the setting and the plot is written by the characters, really. And the setting comes, I don't know. I mean, I opened Leaving at the opera, but I really didn't have any plan. I just opened it there because you're a novelist, you know this. You draw on your own life for material because that's the world that you live in. So I love the opera. I was introduced to it by my husband. So he is a real scholar. I am really not. I'm just a very enthusiastic audience member, but there was a particular performance of Tosca that I saw that was very powerful, and I wanted to record it and sort of celebrate it. And I wasn't thinking of anything more when I opened it with that scene and with Sarah remembering this moment, which was very powerful for her. And then as the story moved along, then it became interesting and useful in other ways. But I wasn't thinking of that when I opened the book that way. It just becomes, once it's there, it's part of the book. It's part of the story.
So many things in what you just said. The first one is just a little aside. I think I saw that Tosca that you're talking about. I think so. I'm also an occasional opera goer, but when you describe it in the book, it came back to me as a memory. And I thought, remember that when she just...
Yeah. Well, it's a famous performance. And some of my opera friends have asked me, now I can't remember, but I did look it up. I think it was 2018.
Sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
She's famous, and real opera lovers know her and say, oh, yes, she's fantastic. So you and I were seeing something that was very special.
Incredibly special. And although I don't know enough about opera to know ahead of time to get all excited about that coming, it was magnificent when I was there.
Yeah.
I have to jump back to Cost for a minute because I just started reading Cost about a week ago because my second novel has done what you just described. It suddenly, addiction has appeared in this book. And I was not planning at all to write about it. I don't know that much about it. So it's going to involve a lot of research. And I was doing research about novels to read about addiction, and costs came up. I thought, well, I can do that. So I wonder, sometimes when things appear in novels, I wonder, are they completely haphazard? Is there something telling us? Was there something maybe telling you to put Tosca in the very beginning of the book that you weren't aware of?
Well, yes and no. It's partly, the part of my mind that chose Tosca is also the part that created this plot. And I'm driven to trouble, really, so that when I open the book, just like you, the book opens with a pair of older parents and their daughter at a summer house, and it's describing their lives and who they are. And it was going to be this very sort of quiet, short novel that I was going to write in a very short period of time. And then it's told in different voices. And I go into the older brother's mind, Stephen, he knows his mother's going to ask him if he's seen his younger brother, Jack, and he has seen him. And so I'm in his mind remembering his visit. And as he remembers the apartment, I thought his brother is a heroin addict. That changes the entire book. The book becomes about that. And I think part of me was already bored by the idea of just these people at the family house having musings about their pasts. And I wanted something more electric. Jack becomes, I thought of him while I was writing this book as Jack the engine, because every scene that Jack is in is electric and generates velocity. It took me, instead of taking me 3 months, it took me 5 years because, like you, I had to learn what it was like to be a heroin addict and learn what their world was like and learn who they dealt with. I talked to policemen, I talked to doctors, I talked to people in rehab, I talked to people who ran rehabs, I talked to interventionists, I talked to family members, I talked to addicts, I went to addicts meetings. So it took me a long time to learn what that world was like.
Yes, all that is in front of me. I'm keeping a list of, I've had a couple of those conversations, but I have a lot of work to do myself. That sounds like for costs, you had already started to put words on paper before this engine jumped into the picture.
Yeah.
Was that the case with Leaving as well? Or did you already know what the engine was?
I knew what the engine was in Leaving. Unlike most of my books, I did have a sense of the plot in this one.
Okay. And the characters didn't lead you too far astray.
No, they did what they were supposed to. They led me to the ending.
Oh my gosh. Cooperative characters, how wonderful. So what's your writing process? I love to hear how other writers do this.
I write first thing in the morning. It's been interrupted, actually, in the last 8 years. Always before the last 8 years, I would write before I did anything else. I didn't read my email. I didn't look at the papers. I didn't find out anything about the world, because I wanted to enter writing in a state that was sort of untouched by the world. And now the world has become so pressing and so important that I have changed that. I do look at the paper and look at the headlines before I start to write. And it's very distracting. I found very troubling. But still, that's my general practice. I write first thing in the morning for as long as I can, and then I stop. I don't write a first draft. You asked me a question about first drafts. I don't write like that. I write every chapter is a draft, and I rewrite every chapter starting with the first sentence. Each time I start to write it, I start at the beginning of the chapter and write it until it's like brushing hair. You get the tangles, you go further and further along the length of the hair until all the tangles are out, and then I go to the next chapter. And then when I get to the end of it, theoretically, it's the final draft. It is a final draft. There's still changes to be made, but I don't write a first draft and then go back and change characters and change the plot and say this isn't working. I do all that as I'm going through the book. I'm a very slow writer, so I don't mean to suggest that I write the book and it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do a first draft and a second draft and revise. I revise each chapter as I'm writing it.
I see. And that's not that I have the experience you do, but that's similar to my process. My daughter's a writer. She says, Mommy, just get up in the morning and just write stuff down. If it's a big mess, you can always go back later and fix it. Well, I cannot deal with a big mess. If I write down in the morning and it's a big mess, the next day I look at it and I want to despair. I don't want to walk into a big mess. I have to start with something that's somewhat organized and somewhat polished, or I don't like it at all. And then I have to go over it and over and over. But it took me way longer than 5 years to write my first book. But that's just how I have to work myself.
However you do it, that's your path. It took me 7 years to write my first novel, and it didn't involve any research at all.
You give me hope. One thing I noticed as a writer I'd really like to explore with you is how did you determine that you were going to write a lot of this book in present tense, which I took to be the parts that are happening as we go along, with a lot of declarative sentences, which you don't always use a lot of declarative sentences. So were you conscious of doing that? Was that a choice? No, interesting.
I mean, it is told there's a lot, as you know, a lot of it takes place in the past. So I wanted to make it clear which part was happening today and which part had happened 30 years ago. So that's why the change in tenses. But I don't know about the sentences. I'm not aware of that. I wasn't aware of that.
Well, that's interesting. Once again, so I'd like to talk about what to me is the big theme in the book, the notion of honor and the concept of honor as a value that may be fading from our society. And I don't want to reveal any spoilers, so I'm just going to say I would love to hear what you have to say about how the concept of honor played out in Leaving. Is that fair?
So, yeah, really, all my books are about questions of integrity, questions of moral responsibility, questions of ethical obligation for a person. What does it mean to be a human? What are your responsibilities if you're an ethical person? And they play out in different places in the world. Sweetwater is about the environment. Cost is about family responsibility to one another. Sparta is about what are we doing as a country to people that we ask to risk their lives for us and take other lives for us. Dawson's Fall is about slavery, about the moral damage that has been done to our country by slavery. And this is about a personal honor, a sense of honor. And one reason that I understood once I had used Tosca as the opening, then I could, and as I say, that wasn't done deliberately, but once it was there, I loved the fact that it was there because opera is a 19th century form and it's a romantic form and it's based on passion and honor. And that's what really drives great opera. And that's why we love it or we don't love it, but it evokes those feelings in us. And many of the operas are about honor and passion. So I could use that as a kind of background for this story, which is about honor and passion. And it made me think about the way our society deals with those issues. The 19th century was really an age of romance, and we live in an age of irony, which dismisses romance and dismisses the idea of honor. Those are not things that are central to an age of irony, which is an age which holds itself at a distance from anything that might engage them deeply, the person. So I was interested in those two notions of irony and passion, or honor and honor. Honor is so in the 19th century, honor was a very important presence. It's in Dickens, it's in Trollope, it's in many, it's the sort of the core of 19th century fiction. Honor is always a part of a book, whether or not somebody is honorable or they may not be, but that's an issue. That's a form of presenting the character. It's important. And starting maybe with Virginia Woolf and the modernists, that became less important as a part of the narrative. And Virginia Woolf mocks the 19th century world for taking honor so seriously. So we moved away from that notion, but it's still an important part of our society. And if you read the Constitution or Abraham Lincoln, this idea of being honorable and standing up for your commitments and keeping your promises and the vows that you make. When I was doing research for Sparta, I spent a lot of time talking to people in the military. And in that culture, the idea of honor and taking a vow to support the Constitution and to support our country is very different. And civilians don't think about those things the way people in the military do. We're starting to see it now because of what's happening in politics. There are people who are standing up for things and saying things that we didn't hear them saying 15 years ago, talking about honor and integrity. And it becomes, all of a sudden, it's salient because we're hearing people lie to us barefacedly and pretend they're telling the truth when we know that they are not. honor and integrity are becoming suddenly important and visible as a part of discourse, but they weren't. They weren't for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested by that because I grew up as a Quaker. And so the idea of who you are in society has always been part of my family life, part of my own life. And I was kind of bemused to see this idea of personal integrity had just become blurred and kind of indistinct in public discourse. It wasn't something people talked about. And so this story is about somebody for whom honor is central, and the idea of leading a life that is honorable becomes the most important thing to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. That is true. I was just thinking when you were speaking, Edith Wharton is someone who almost spans the difference between the 19th century and the 20th century.
You're absolutely right. I mean, she's mostly a 19th century writer, but yes, for her, the idea of honor is crucially important. Crucially important. Lily Bart dies because she refuses to blackmail somebody. She cannot tell. And the idea of blackmailing in the 19th century, if you've ever read Sherlock Holmes or Trollope, I mean, blackmail, it was absolutely, it's like killing somebody. It's so bad. So it doesn't sound so terrible to us. I mean, we know it's bad, but for them, but that's in that society, it was really a terrible, terrible crime and absolutely dishonorable. And so Lily dies rather than do that. And there's a story that she wrote about a young man who is making a proposal to a woman who's living in Europe. And she slowly reveals the fact that he did not fight in the Civil War. He did not join the battle. And I forget if he hired somebody else to go in his place or he simply didn't go. And that to her is a terrible mark of dishonorability. And she turns him down as a suitor because he's not a man that she could ever trust with her own. So you're absolutely right. For Wharton, honor was really central.
Yeah, and Age of Innocence comes to mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. That turns on the idea of personal honor.
I think we're on this idea of personal honor. It's very difficult as a writer and also as a human being to keep our own self-interest out of it. You know, I think that's part of what's happened in the 20th and 21st century is we can morph it and twist it and think, well, this is honorable because of this thing, when actually we're just looking at our own self-interest at the same time. And I thought it was interesting. I thought your characters did struggle with that notion to a certain extent, and came out in a place where not a lot of people would currently land.
No, it's true. And part of it is, for me, growing up in a New England culture, I'm very aware of the sort of puritanical strain that still inhabits New England, the idea that you should lead a life of rigor, and sometimes it's physical and sometimes it's moral, but it should be, the individual should not get the chance to simply be self-indulgent. That's not leading a proper life if you're a Puritan. So, and the original Puritans were extremely cold and austere, and their view of life was not one that anyone would share today, but it sort of still lingers. And now, since the 1950s, I think we have moved very far in the other direction, which is self-actualization, self-realization, do what you need, attend to yourself. And that is very useful in many ways, but in some ways it allows us to be selfish at a cost to others. Everything moves in one direction or the other, but it seems to me that we've moved very far from the Puritan notion, which was too far in terms of asceticism. But now some of us may be too far in the direction of allowing ourselves to do whatever we want to do.
Yeah. And Sarah has a lovely interior monologue about that in terms of divorce, which I really admired tremendously. Another thing is I used to practice law. So as a lawyer, I know when you sign a contract, there are all the terms spelled out, but within every contract is almost like an escape clause that if something makes this contract impossible to carry out, if a tornado wiped out the crop the day before you're supposed to harvest it, well, you can't provide a crop. So, you either have worked out terms in the contract that what you do if that happens, or there's a lot of law around what you do if that happens. And I was thinking if maybe that notion hasn't in a way carried over into our private contracts. We haven't really expressed it that way, but our commitment to marriage, our commitment to honor our parents, our commitment to care for our children, if there isn't some we haven't come up with this selfish sort of escape hatch. Well, I'll do it unless you do this, or I'll do it until it becomes too much of a burden for me. Do you perceive that at all happening?
It certainly has changed the way we think of marriage. I mean, marriage before the 50s, say, divorce was pretty uncommon, and now it's extremely common. So the idea that you take these vows, and I've been divorced and remarried, but I took a vow saying that I would cleave to this man for the rest of my life, better for worse, richer, poorer, and I broke that vow. And and lots of people do. And, you know, for me, it was an untenable situation, but I felt very seriously that I had done something that was damaging to the community as well as to myself. And how could I trust myself? And how could I be proud of myself if I had broken a vow that was as solemn as that vow was? So I don't know what it says. And I don't have an answer there. I don't say that. I certainly wouldn't suggest that everybody who gets married has to stay married. But it asks the question, what does a vow mean? How far are we willing to go to honor it?
It does. And I'm divorced, but I've been married to my second husband for 43 years now.
Good job.
So I'm so glad. Honestly, for me, I could not have stayed in that marriage. So I feel very conflicted about this whole conversation because in a way, I give myself a pass and say, well, I still am ashamed. I still know I broke a vow. It still makes me feel bad that I did that. And yet, everything that came for me afterwards was possible because I did that thing. So there's a lot of conflict around promises and honor that aren't so, we have to be honest and say they're not so easily resolved. We can admire tremendously and strive for that honorable position and be honest about when we haven't been honorable and how it's benefited us. I think that the whole concept is endlessly fascinating.
And I don't think there's one answer. Because life changes. But I guess I think what's important is the questioning and to keep asking yourself, are you doing what is necessary? Are you doing something that you can be proud of?
The other relationships that were so interesting and so beautifully explored in the book were the parent-child relationships. Both families had such an interesting mix of reactions to the divorces of their parents, the potential divorces and the coming divorces. I loved Sarah's observation. It seems somewhat counterintuitive that we actually need our children more as we age. It rang so true to me. And I wonder, is that from yourself or is that from observing the world around you?
Both. I'm very conscious of my friends who, say with enormous pride, I spend every Friday picking up at preschool and I get the whole afternoon with him. And everyone I know is very conscious of the fact that, our children can say no to us. They can say, I don't want you to pick him up at preschool anymore because I'm going to do such and such. And then you're shut out and they have the authority and you don't. So your relationship to your children is unchangeable. You pick them up from school. You decide what they do after school. There's nothing that can change that. But once you get to grandchildren, once you get to your children who have their own lives, it's different. And that's a shock. That's a shock at many levels.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I also think there's something to the fact, I think one of your characters said this, almost no one knows us as well as our children do. Because when you're raising, our spouses know us very well, but when you're raising children, you're never putting on an act. You're always who you are. So you get through that entire relationship and they know you. You can't fool them. So it's kind of liberating in a way to know here are people I can be around who love me, warts and all, and I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. And sometimes you need that refresh, I think, in being with them. Yeah. And yet they can decide, as you said, whether they want to be around you or not. This is a writerly question. I was quite struck by the difference in the births for Meg and Kat, their process of giving birth. And I wondered, did you intend for those scenes to convey more than just, wow, sometimes it's life and death and sometimes it goes like it's supposed to? Or were you drawing some kind of a comparison that you wanted to draw out for me?
I guess at some level, I was thinking, somebody asked me why Meg's birth was so difficult. And I said, there are two daughters in this book, and there are different ways to lose a daughter.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. And it also was necessary for her to have a child to move into the next phase of everyone's relationship.
Yes. I don't know why. My daughter has children. And when I read Meg's scenes, I was, of course, really upset and very in the moments with this family. But for some reason, hearing it read by someone else almost undid me. I couldn't just listen to that straight through. I had to stop and get a hold of myself because it really affected me emotionally. So well done, you. Can we talk about Bella, the amazing Bella? Do you have a standard by any chance?
I now have my 4th black standard poodle.
Aha.
Yeah. It's a breed I love and a dog I love. She's outside right now. The one I have now is not the one in the book. The one I have now is very different. But the one in the book is based on my preceding dog, who was named Lacey. Years ago, my sister, Kathy, lives in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and that's where Elizabeth Marshall Thomas lives, and she wrote The Secret Life of Dogs. I don't know if you read that.
Oh, I have read that, yeah.
And so Kathy knew her, and she said, oh, my sister's a writer, and she loves dogs. And Thomas said, does she write about them? And my sister said, no, she never does. And Thomas said, well, if she loves dogs and she's a writer, why doesn't she write about them? And so my sister said that to me. And I said, I never wanted to write about it, put a dog in a novel, because I think dogs are too important to make them minor characters. I never want to have a dog that just comes in and out and you have to remember to feed it. So that was in the back of my mind, that I had not honored a dog enough to make a dog a serious character. And so this was my chance to put in my dog, Lacey, who is Bella.
She is a marvelous character, just as important as anybody else in the book. And I absolutely loved her.
Thank you.
Yes, I love dogs the way you love. My 10-year-old granddaughter likes to write novels. And she always, when she has a chance to interview an author, which she does sometimes, always asks that, mirrored questions. What part of the book was the most fun to write, and what part of the book was the most difficult to write? So on Thea's behalf, I'm asking you those questions.
Let's see. It's hard to remember looking back. It's kind of like dreaming. I like writing about place. So those descriptions are fun for me. It was fun for me to write about the music in the subway. I liked writing about the dog. I don't know. Some things come more easily. I liked writing Sarah and Warren's conversations in their older part of their relationship. It's hard to look back and say this was easy and that this was fun and that was not. They're all difficult in the moment, but they're all also a kind of discovery. It's kind of digging your way to the center of the earth, and it's all difficult but rewarding. It's not like, I don't know. It's not as though the early part is more fun to write than the latter part. I liked writing about Warren's office and his partners. That was fun. And I liked writing about Sarah and her professional life. That was also fun.
I like that too. We don't often get that in novels we know somebody does something. Somebody's a doctor, somebody's a whatever, but we don't really see them in their work environment all that often. And I really enjoyed that about both of them too. I also wondered if why you gave them creative careers that had to do with art and culture, but the next generation seemed to all be connected to tech. Was that just the world is moving in this direction, so this is how it's going to be?
That was kind of it. I mean, lots of my friends are in the arts, and every time I ask them what their kids are doing, it's always something in tech, something that I can't begin to understand. And I was reading in the paper today about everything in the Industrial Revolution, ever since it began, has been directed towards taking jobs away from humans. That's all it does. That's the only thing that it does. And we've now gotten to the point at which AI is going to answer the phone. It's going to write your letters. Nobody is going to be hired to be your driver. I'm going out to Los Angeles next month for a book festival. And they say, we have a relationship with this driverless car service. And remember secretaries? Remember when every person in business had a secretary? That whole tranche of work has been eliminated. And we're just watching one rank after another being eliminated by automation and tech. And so I was reading some article about politics, and it said that young people, one reason people were voting for Trump was that they thought that he was going to create an economy that they could get into, that they're not seeing a place in I don't know exactly what age they're talking about, but they're not. When I was in my 20s, every man I knew had this plan and he was going to work. I mean, I knew a lot of people who were in the profession. So they were doctors or lawyers or they went into finance. And it was clear that there were places for them.
Mhm.
And I think that's less and less clear now that there are fewer places for people to get jobs in. So that was my response to what I'm seeing around me. And I don't know that it's representative. It's completely anecdotal, but that was what I was seeing.
Yeah, I do see it too. And my family, we actually have not done that. I don't know why exactly. Our next generation, we have a teacher, a writer, an entrepreneur, hoping that works out, and a marketer. So I don't know. All those jobs might be going away too with AI. Hope not. I really hope not. But it's impossible to predict and very terrifying. Before we go to sort of general questions, I wanted to ask about the foreshadowing in your book, which was so subtle and so brilliantly done. And I wondered, did you know every step along the way, oh, I'm going to drop a little breadcrumb here. I'm going to drop a little breadcrumb here. Or did it just flow naturally as part of the story?
Well, the breadcrumbs that I was very aware of are at the very end of the book. So if that's what you're talking about, those were deliberate. And I took them in and I took them out and put them back and took them out. Is this too obvious? No, it's not obvious, but the reader will remember afterwards. The dishwasher, the car keys. So those particular things I was very aware of. The rest of it, no, it just felt that I knew exactly where we were going, and one thing after another made it clear to me. Some readers said I could see exactly where this was going. One woman wrote to me on my website and said, I've just finished your book and I just have no idea what happened. Could you please explain it to me? And I would be happy in theory, but I thought if she really doesn't understand it, it's 300 pages. She must, I can't tell her, explain the whole thing to her. So some people were very aware and some people weren't. So I think it kind of requires careful reading. And if you are a careful reader, you do feel that the steps are carrying you to this ending.
Well, I thought it was really well done. I thought it was subtle, but clear. And so I don't think that's always easy to find that nice balance, but I thought you did a great job.
Thank you. I'm glad you.
So is there a new project simmering for you right now?
Yes, but I don't talk about anything while I'm writing it.
Okay, great. When you're writing, do you read fiction?
I do. I saw that on your list of questions, and it's really interesting. I do read fiction. I remember Joan Didion saying that she doesn't read fiction while she didn't read fiction while she was writing it. And when Ragtime came out, she said, I picked it up. And then I saw that it had a very strong rhythm and it was going to infect my writing, and I put it away. And I'm very aware of what I'm reading while I'm writing. And with each book, I have a particular work of fiction that I use as a kind of touchstone, so that every morning before I start writing, I will read a few pages of this book, whatever book it is. And I can see the presence of that book in my books.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes other people do too. And when I wrote Cost, I read Michael Cunningham's book, The Hours. I would read a few pages of that. And there is a wonderful Virginia Woolf scholar named Anne Fernald, and she reviewed the book in the Yale Review or something. And she said, it's so evident that Robinson is channeling Virginia Woolf.
Way of Michael Cunningham.
I know. I was delighted that she could see that presence. And there were moments in that book when I was thinking, is this too obvious? Am I going to be sued for plagiarism? I mean, not that I used any of the words, but I really was absorbing those patterns and those rhythms and the cadences that both Woolf and Cunningham used in that book. And I just did a book event yesterday for a library, and that was about Dawson's Fall. And for that book, because it was a historical novel, which I had never written before, I read Wolf Hall. And I would read a couple of pages of that. And when I reread that book, which I never reread my books, but I reread it because there's so much detail in it. And I wanted to be able to answer questions for this audience. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, just doesn't sound like me. Why is this sentence so short? And then I thought, And there was one sentence, and I thought, oh, it's Wolf Hall. That's why I was writing this way. And with leaving, I was reading Tessa Hadley.
I know Tessa Hadley.
You don't know her?
I don't. I'm going to write this name down.
She's a wonderful writer. She's English, and I think you will like her.
Oh, I know I will. Well, thank you. I wish I knew about her before, but I'm going to find out about her now.
Have a look. I think you'll like her a lot. She's very, very good. So yes, is the answer. I always, there's a book that I'm connecting to while I'm writing it.
I love the intentionality of that. I could not say I can't read fiction because it might take me years to write a book. How could I not read fiction for years? I'd go crazy. You don't reread your own books, of course, but do you reread other books? Are there certain books you've read more than once, favorites, inspiration?
Sometimes, yes, I do. Right now, I have read, when I teach, I have taught the same books for certain books for years. I've taught Anna Karenina 15 times, and I read it every time I teach it. So I've read that many, many times. Other books, I'm going to reread Portrait of a Lady because I'm doing an online Zoom with somebody.
Cool.
So they're Edith Wharton, I would reread happily, but mostly not. Mostly I read new fiction.
There's so many new. There's so many wonderful books. It's hard to devote yourself to rereading the same. I mean, I've read Middlemarch 3 times. I probably will read it again, but there aren't that many books you feel that you can devote that amount of time to, I think. So a few fun questions before we go. If you were stuck on a desert island all by yourself and could only have one book, what would you bring?
Anna Karenina, I would. It's such a great book. It has so much in it, and it's so much fun to teach and talk about. And it's just so voluminous as a sort of philosophical presence. And it's so thoughtful, and it's so full of compassion, and it's so interesting. It transports us to 19th century Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And Tolstoy is so flawed and vulnerable and trusting and terrible and unconscionable in some ways. It's just a fascinating book. So that would be my go-to.
Well, the good parts, the fascinating good parts, I did perceive a little bit in Leaving, I have to say.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So describe your perfect day. You wake up in the morning, you can control the whole day. What would you do?
Okay, there would be no politics.
Yes.
It would be a peaceful country with a democratic government, and I wouldn't have to read the papers before I worked. I would be up here in the country with my dog, and I would spend the morning writing and then spend the afternoon off and play tennis. And then I would take my dog out on a big walk, and then I'd come home and have dinner with my husband.
That sounds pretty darn close to my perfect day, too. That sounds amazing. But I have to ask, would that day end in dessert?
Do I have dessert? Yes.
Day end in dessert? And if it did, what dessert would you have?
I have the same dessert. It is my reward for making it through the day. It is dulce de leche ice cream.
Oh my gosh, fabulous. That is so good. I kind of forget about that ice cream, but it is amazing ice cream.
It's really good.
Choice. Well, Roxana, thank you so much for your time. It has been such a pleasure talking with you. Is there something you wish I had asked you? Is something you would like to share about your book or your writing process or what's coming up for you that I didn't make possible?
No, this has been a really interesting conversation. This is not a question or anything, but as I say, I did a book event yesterday, and it was one of the few that I've done where everybody has read the book. So it was a real luxury to be able to talk freely without sort of having to protect the suspenseful moments. And so that was really fun. I was reminded of the difference between giving a book talk at a store when nobody has read the book and you're trying to make it sound great and also not give anything away. So that's just an observation about the writer's life. I'm sure you've had both kinds of.
In fact, I did a book event last week with a whole group who had read the book, and it was there were no spoiler concerns. But it was interesting because a couple of things that I knew would be open to interpretation and possibly controversial in the book were.
Oh, they were.
People wanted to talk about it, which was great because we got into a really in-depth conversation about these matters that, you're right, in a bookstore, you're just dancing around what actually happens. So nobody.
And what sort of controversy were they? Because with Leaving, people get angry.
Yeah.
And they take it out on me, which I find difficult. What happened with you? Were they angry at the characters, or did they have different ideas about what the characters did?
my protagonist makes an honorable choice at the end, and a lot of people were angry. They thought she should not have chosen as she did. I kept saying, well, she chose.
That's right.
I made it pretty clear who she was all the way through, and she made that choice. But what I was talking with my daughter about, I think they're really saying is, I wouldn't have made that choice. And that's fine. And that also shows that they were engaged in this story. They related to her choice in a way that was not their choice. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation. I think it would be strange, although I don't know, maybe I would like it if I went to a book event and everybody said, oh, I love that ending. It was absolutely perfect. Some people do say that. But other people say, no, I didn't like that at all. So, can't please every reader, but like you, I do aim to engage careful, thoughtful readers. And when that becomes apparent in a book talk, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Well done. Your book is amazing. Roxana, thank you so much for being with me today on our Lit Garden author series. It was wonderful to have you. And I wonder if you might share with our listeners and viewers where they can find your work and where they might find you in person next.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really enjoyable conversation for me. You ask wonderful questions. My book is available at bookshop.org, the other online bookstore that starts with A. If you want a signed copy, you can go to the Corner Bookstore in New York on Madison Avenue. You can reach them online and you can order it and they will send it to you and they will ask me to inscribe it to you. So you can get a signed book from them. And I'll be in Los Angeles at the book festival there next month.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.